Why is modern art so ugly? Odd angles, nondescript shapes, weird colors are often all people see in modern art. Is this kind of art ugly? Well, for starters, beauty and ugliness are subjective concepts, varying from person to person. Ugly versus pretty implies that there are rules to how one should portray certain forms, themes, or ideas. But the thing is that traditional rules are thrown out the window with modern art. Even then, if modern art is compared to the art of the classical period, beautiful realistic portrait, maybe majority of us will be inclined to call it ugly. It is the difference between orderly and chaotic that matters here. There are some of us who love the beauty of the realistic image in art, and some of the most beautiful paintings in the world are realist. But for some, there is beauty in design, in chaos, which is the main characteristic feature of modern art. First of all, we need to be clear about the concept of modern art and be able to distinguish it from the contemporary one. The contemporary deals with what's happening in the present, whereas the modern is a specific time, beginning with the application of Enlightenment ideals in the 19th century, as well as corresponding responses and reactions. Some might say that we're still in the modern period, others may disagree. And as for ugliness, well, yeah, maybe the painting is ugly. The question is, if ugliness is something that we necessarily turn away from. Is it that the painting, in fact, isn't ugly, just uneventful and uninteresting? We usually have a response to ugliness, something that makes us want to look at it more, even if we don't want to hang it on the wall. This doesn't happen with art so uninteresting that it is invisible to our senses. Visual art, mainly from the classical period, has always had a complex relationship with its viewers. For most of its history, it was mainly a matter of representation and documentation, an archiving of people, places, and events, as well as illustration of narratives and ideas. Over the course of recorded history, art has served many purposes. It has served as ornamentation for that which we've held dearly and esteemed highly, and it has been the vulgar symbol of wealth and power. It has been the response to science and math, often shifting form alongside the discoveries of our place in the universe and what lies beneath the readily visible world around us. It has mapped our perception of space, dimension, and perspective, and it has been an early adopter of new media and technology. But there have always been artists concerned with form and expression, even those doing mere representation. Things changed with the coming of modern period. One of the distinguishable features of modern art is the importance of concept and viewpoint, where representation for representation's sake is no longer supreme. It elevates the everyday object or looks through the lens of multiple possibilities. It bends form in the way that space is curved and looks from various vantage points simultaneously. Connecting with modern art often requires more of us, as it's as much about context and commentary as it is about visuals. What a lot of artists started exploring at times was different ways of seeing things, having a different perspective, relating what was real with what can be perceived if you look differently at things. Some people can accept more. Some people remain rooted in the realistic and see beauty only there. They don't ask us to change our opinion, just our perspective. Modern art functions in an open-ended manner. The value comes from the artist's and audience's mind, not a rulebook. When looking at modern art, we need to disassociate ourselves from many requirements for what it must accomplish. It's like visually exploring a foreign language. We may not know what it means, but maybe we just like the way it sounds. Another reason is that, essentially, a certain amount of modern art is created to address an idea about society or art itself. This is frequently accomplished by challenging some convention extant in art. To do so might not produce a visually pleasing result, but in the right context, can be very intellectually satisfying and thought-provoking. There is a purpose to these works beyond decorative beauty. Beauty is just one component, and not necessarily the most important. We need to think about all of the political, social, and cultural upheaval that was happening during the early part of the 20th century, especially in Europe. Art is the mirror of the soul of the artist, the society, the culture which has produced it. A beautiful soul produces beautiful art. A harmonious soul produces harmonious art. A hideous soul produces a hideous art. And a broken soul would want to produce broken art. It also boils down to the fact that since the Industrial Revolution, Not all artists have had to paint pretty pictures for rich patrons to survive. They have had the liberty of expressing their own ideas. So not all of this art is simply meant to look good. Hence, it doesn't always look nice and pretty at first glance. Also, sometimes a large portion of modern artists make their art to reject beauty and the ideals that everyone has grown accustomed to. Modern art is often an act of rebellion or symbolism. Artists do it because they really want people to stop upon seeing their art and say, "What does that mean? What's the point?" Another reason for this so-called ugliness of modern art is technology. Years ago, if we wanted a picture of something beautiful, we would have painted it, or would have found someone else to paint it. For instance, Henry VIII sent portrait artists to the court of other European royalty to help him decide whom to marry. Now, if we want a picture of something beautiful, we take a photograph of it. There's no point producing beautiful art. Now, it's high time that art makes us think, challenges us, or amuses us. When photography emerged as a medium, painters had less of an urge to paint realistically, so they started playing around to see what else they could do. Artists were no longer obligated to paint what was realistic because a camera could do that. What they sought was other ways to paint. It was about expanding what they saw, what they found to be beautiful, and they were asking us to consider more. Ultimately, it would do us good to remember that the purpose of art is to evoke. What the art evokes is a matter of artist and audience. Some art is meant to be pretty. Some is meant to be ugly. Some is meant to make us feel like an insignificant, short-lived creature on a lonely rock in an isolated corner of an ever-expanding, profoundly empty, and ultimately doomed universe. It's up to us on what we find more beautiful: a strictly lined-up, manicured garden with rows of flowers all the same, or a lush natural garden with wildflowers strewn all over at random.